So thank you everyone for being here with us today. My name is Sarah Isa. I'm the Partnership Consultant at the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. We are delighted that all of you are here to join us for our first CEO Roundtable in Saudi Arabia. We are being joined today by government and an extraordinary group of CEOs and business leaders across the kingdom. All are taking different approaches to aligning their strategies and operations with the 10 UN principles and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So we're very excited to hear and learn from all of you today. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ayman Afghani, the Deputy Minister of Economy and Planning. Mr. Ayman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh jami'an. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure and excitement that I welcome you to today's CEO Roundtable, hosted by the UN Global Compact to discuss the critical role of the private sector and what it plays in the facilitating and achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. During today's session, I hope to share our views on the need to institutionalize an inclusive development framework that is coherent and rooted in empiricism and policy rigor. One that is predictable and effective in addressing a diverse set of challenges and achieving sustainable development. Moreover, I am eager to hear from our CEOs on the challenges that they face and their plans on achieving the SDGs. As a backdrop to today's session, I would like to highlight the findings from a recent report released by the UN Global Compact last year. The report shows that the progress on bringing about sustainable future for people and the planet is imperfect, and the majority of companies involved in the compact are not doing enough to help bringing about the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In my opinion, and in my opening remarks, I would like to shed light on the underpinnings of this report and provide some insights to what explains this variation. The changing geopolitical context marked by populism, climate change, economic instability, social upheavals, and COVID-19 poses significant challenges for G20 economies as they look to leverage the Sustainable Development Framework, while simultaneously incentivizing the private sector to support SDGs. These changing political and economic circumstances have drastically reduced global financial flows aimed at achieving the SDGs. So in order to attain the SDGs by 2030, an annual investment of around $3.9 trillion is required. However, the current annual investment in SDGs is around 1.4 trillion, resulting in a substantial annual investment gap of 2.5 trillion. It is at this vantage point that we begin to see the potential role of the private sector across developed and developing countries. Incentivizing the private sector has been a widely discussed topic with SDG financing discourses. At the global leadership level, specific attention was given to rethinking the incentive structures that aim to catalyze for efforts to mobilize private finances. Despite substantial discussions and debates, existing modalities have proved inadequate in mobilizing private capital for SDGs. To overcome these structural concerns, it is critical that private capital is mobilized through reformulating incentive structures and intervention modalities on those areas where markets frequently fail, causing delays in development. COVID-19 has served as a unique case study and revealed the fragility of social and economic institutions during adverse shocks. Despite the challenges in mobilizing private sector finances, there are available opportunities. According to the Standard Chartered report in 2020, there is potential for high impact investment in fast growing economies of almost $10 trillion. However, progress often been impeded by the challenges inherent in engaging the private sector on development projects. Dimensions related to strong business motives, the profit outlook, rates of return, and favorable logistical arrangements have all acted to distort decision-making processes around private sector investments. During the G20 summit in Riyadh, member countries stressed the importance of promoting inclusivity and designing policy reforms that aim to improve shared prosperity. In order for countries to be successful with the SDG agenda, they must demonstrate the merits of economic agenda and showcase the shared social and economic benefits for all stakeholders. Ministers and delegates representing Saudi Arabia during the G20 highlighted a number of ways in which businesses and private sector can promote sustainable development. First, decent employment. According to the WEF, World Economic Forum, the private sector is responsible for nearly 90% of the jobs available in the world right now, which means that the private sector has an opportunity to tackle many of these challenges that the world is facing today. For instance, creating jobs has a direct impact on poverty reduction, SDG 1. In addition, by implementing inclusive hiring practices and promoting diversity in the workplaces, businesses can contribute to the overall reduction of inequality, SDG 10. Finally, decent jobs allow people to thrive, SDG 8. Second, responsible production. SDG 12, related to responsible production and consumption, is a key element when it comes to production patterns. Natural resources are becoming increasingly scarce, and the material footprint of every human being is growing. Businesses can also focus on developing more responsible and conservative-oriented practices and techniques that have a positive impact on the environment, society, and economy. Third, promoting education. Businesses can be key drivers for education by investing in education programs to develop the skills of their employees and mainstream sustainability into their practices. Another way that the private sector can promote education is by joining and investing in educational institutions to help them design programs that will train professionals who can respond to the demands of the future. In an attempt to advance the agendas further and develop more innovative solutions on how to best mobilize private sector investment, the Ministry of Economy and Planning has identified a set of topics that will guide the policy research agenda in the coming year. And these include topics such as economic modernization and inclusive businesses, tax reform, investment in R&D and market innovation, promoting development institutions that focus on gender equality, leveraging innovative financing vehicles, maintaining sustainable public finances over the midterm, and streamlining credit rating systems. While these policy recommendations have the potential to induce the private sector to invest in SDGs, the development outcome of these investments depend primarily on the macroeconomic stability and institutional environment of these economies. Given the diversity of context and stage of development, G20 communities should also realize there is no universal solution to the challenges facing developed and developing countries. Rather, policy reforms need to be country-specific to mobilize private financing for SDGs in countries that are currently abandoned. The changes we need in the decade of action will not happen through incremental improvements and adjustments to business as usual. A structural rethink is needed. Now is the time for the private sector, led by the distinguished CEOs that we have here today with us, to cultivate and lead a paradigm shift in the thinking around how to best involve the private sector in the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. I'm very keen to hear your thoughts on the proposed research agenda. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayman. Thank you for this inspiring speech, and thank you for your time today. And now over to Her Excellency, Nathalie Foussier, the UN Resident Coordinator. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Mr. Ayman Afghani, Deputy Minister of Economy and Planning, Dr. Khalid Al-Yahya, Secretary General of the Council of Saudi Chambers, Mr. Majid Al-Asfoor, General Manager for Strategy and Alignment of Ministry of Economy and Planning, business leaders, colleagues. Indeed, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the first UN Saudi Arabia high-level dialogue with businesses and government on the Sustainable Development Goals. I want to thank Mr. Al-Afghani very much for this very eloquent speech and advocacy towards the role of the private sector and the need to have the private sector on board for the SDGs. This roundtable is an important and timely opportunity to begin the exchange of ideas and good practices on sustainability, as well as the challenges and opportunities. It's an opportunity to begin exploring how Saudi business can advance sustainable development in the kingdom, in the region, and around the world. The private sector has indeed a crucial role to play in supporting the government of Saudi Arabia in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the emerging climate crisis. The devastating fallout from these crises will be felt for years unless smart investments in economic, societal, and climate resilience ensure a robust and sustainable recovery of the global economy. The latest data from the Sustainable Development Goals Report 2020 illustrates the continued uneveness of progress and the many areas in which significant improvement is required. Progress continued to be made in some areas. Global poverty continued to decline. Maternal and child mortality rates were reduced. More people gained access to electricity, and countries were developing national policies to support sustainable development and signing international environmental protection agreements. In other areas, however, progress had either stalled or been reversed. The number of persons suffering from hunger was on the rise. Climate change was occurring much more quickly than anticipated, and inequality continued to increase within and among countries. Older persons, persons with disabilities, migrants, and refugees are more likely to experience severe effects from COVID-19 due to their specific health and socioeconomic circumstances. In Davos, last month, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres challenged business leaders, noting, "It is time to change course and take the sustainable path." In this year, we have a unique opportunity to do so. We can use our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic to move from fragilities to resilience. The challenges in our world today are more integrated. In order to overcome fragmented responses, we need to fully understand that the three dimensions of sustainable development, economic, social, and environmental, call for a fully integrated approach. Partnerships are a critical driver of progress across the full agenda. Governments, the UN, and a diverse range of stakeholders from both private sector, academia, and civil society must all commit to a more coordinated and integrated approach. Transforming our approach to achieve the 2030 Agenda and Vision 2030 depends on leadership, innovation, and collaboration at all levels, global, national, and local. In Saudi Arabia, events like today's Roundtable give us an important opportunity to draw upon the knowledge and experience of partnership experts on the ground to ensure that we replicate and scale the most promising models of strategic collaboration. In Saudi Arabia, we are building a platform for businesses through the Global Compact to come together to identify common challenges and shared goals alongside civil society, academia, government, and the United Nations partners with a view towards amplifying outcomes and results to inspire other companies. I encourage all of you to continue raising your ambitions by engaging with UN country team and by joining the UN Global Compact Saudi Arabia. Companies like yours have an important opportunity to serve as a force for good through your own strategies and operations. So let's get to work. I look forward to a fruitful exchange and insightful dialogue. I hope that today you will be inspired. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for the speech. So before beginning the panel discussion, I wanted to remind everyone why we are here today. So in 2020, KSA hosted the G20 and the B20 summit, where the voice of the global business community was recognized and addressed by the G20 leaders. Business has a share of responsibilities to honor and a substantial role to play in building back an economy that is socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable. Today, the vast majority of businesses have policies covering all 10 UN principles and SDGs and are taking action towards the SDGs. But policies alone would make a little difference when goal setting and ambition are not ambitious enough to deliver the impact at the scale that we need across all the SDGs. The 10 principles of the United Nations Global Compact are foundational to sustainable business, bringing together the most important and universal standards of conduct across human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. We decided to convene today a select group of CEOs in KSA to exchange best practices and knowledge around sustainability, as well as their challenges and opportunities. Through this roundtable, we will get a clear idea of what government plans are to support corporate sustainability and what ambition goals leading companies are setting that can set an example for others in addition to the challenges they face. We hope through this session, you will be able to learn, to share knowledge, and enhance engagement through multi-stakeholder partnership initiatives in support of the SDGs. So let's get started. Mr. Ibrahim Al-Hilali is an economist and lead on the partnership and SDG awareness at the Resident Coordinator Office in Saudi Arabia. He obtained a bachelor's degree at the Merrimack College in Boston. He also received a master's degree in health economics and management from the University of Bologna in Italy. He worked as a medical assistant at Lawrence General Hospital in the US, as well as health economist at the Vision Realization Office at the Ministry of Health in Saudi Arabia. Al-Hilali joined the UNRC office in June 2020, and he was one of the co-authors of the UN Diagnostics paper on the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 in Saudi Arabia. I now invite Mr. Ibrahim to moderate this panel.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your introduction. It is a great opportunity for me to be part of this event and engage and moderate this conversation with very important governmental stakeholders and CEOs of the private sector. We will discuss and highlight their efforts in accelerating the objectives of the Kingdom Vision 2030 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. In this regard, I am happy to start by introducing His Excellency Dr. Khalid Al-Yahya, the Secretary General of the Council of Saudi Chambers. Dr. Khalid, happy to have you with us. My question to you as the umbrella for the business sector in Saudi Arabia, how do you see the private sector implementing the strategic objectives of the programs and initiatives of the Vision 2030? Mr. Khalid, Dr. Khalid, up to you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. First, let me just say a few words about the importance of this event, and which I hope next time we will be doing it not virtual, but in person. But nevertheless, we're able to pull it together. The thanks really goes to Natalie, who I know for a long, long time before she landed in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. And really appreciate her energy and passion and commitment and continuous engagement in these important issues at the official level, but also her engagement to the business and also the civil society at various levels. And I also appreciate the hard work by Sarah and the rest of the team. Actually, I'm impressed by your ability to gather such a great group. I've gone through the list of participants and speakers, and I'm amazed actually. I know most of them, well, not all, but quite a bit of them. And I think you gather the best minds and hearts in this group, people representing government and private sector and also thought leaders. And some of them I worked with when I was in the Deputy Secretary General for the G20 and working closely with the Ministry of Economy and Planning, where we really try to put the sustainable development and the SDGs at the heart of the development debate, especially within the development working group led by my colleagues at the ministry, who've done a great job in really prioritizing these issues, also garnering your support and engagement from participants from around the world, whether G20 members and also worked closely with the B20. And I think we were successful as a country and also as an organization in having inclusiveness and sustainability as a really core theme, not only at the government agenda, but also in the private sector agenda. And I hope some of these initiatives will be followed and taken care of by our colleagues in Italy, the current presidency of the G20. Actually, I am not the best person to speak on behalf of the private sector, giving the excellent list of great minds and executive and leaders in the private sector that I'm sure they will have the chance to speak after me. and they will share actually more sort of like solid and rigorous steps and plans and how they're going to pursue the objectives and the principle of the United Nations Global Compacts in their strategies, in their operational plans, and their strategic objectives, and also in their sort of like engagement with government and also international organization and global businesses. Here we're at the Council of Chamber of Commerce, and recently, by the way, we're according to the new law that's been passed recently, now it is the union rather than the council, which gives it more mandate and greater responsibility to not just to be coordinating private sector and business community activities and represent their interest, but also to serve as a think tank and a thought leader in kind of like shaping a sustainable and an inclusive and fair policy agenda that we could take to the policymakers and decision maker at the highest level, and kind of like prove that the private sector across the board really cares about social and economic and environmental issues, and also cares about the well-being of communities and the impact of businesses that they could really make in the lives of the normal people, and how actually their economic and financial interests are really closely linked with the macro level interest of the whole community, which I think this part of your work today, and inshallah it will continue, is to kind of like cement and strengthen this understanding. Not all the private sector participants are aware of all the, probably they know a bit about the SDGs, about sustainable development challenges, especially that we are experiencing recently with the pandemic and kind of like it's a critical period of uncertainty and change, and certainly businesses and people tend to focus on really what they have in hands and the difficulties they're dealing with. So I think it's this platform and the work of the United Nations office here, and also as responsible leaders, that we could communicate the message of the SDGs, first of all, to make sure that people understand them. So that's the kind of educational and awareness level, and that's part of our mission. Increasing also their participation in this dialogue, because if they just hear or read about what we're talking about in the newspaper, there is 100 news in the newspaper. So this would be as good or as equal as the other piece of news that they receive in the newspaper and their WhatsApp and their smartphones. So I think we need to adapt to how to be effective in communicating the importance of this, but then also communicating this to the organized businesses. And I see a few members here. Rayan is the leader of one of the leading banks in Saudi Arabia, and it's these organizations that usually are taking the lead and kind of like spreading the positive impact as a message of what businesses could gain from engaging effectively and in a sustainable manner in pursuing and aligning their objectives with the objectives of the SDGs and even, I remember I had the pleasure of working with Kofi Annan as an intern and just in the mid of the 90s, before actually there were discussion about the Millennium Development Goals. So I've been following the development and the progress that's been made. Certainly there's a great result that's been achieved. By the way, Ibrahim, stop me if whenever you want me. I see the agenda. We have about almost like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to see how can I effectively and contribute something. All I could say is that this certainly an old agenda that's been adapted over time to fit the changing challenges. So it's not the challenges we're facing in the 80s. Certainly there's human or global challenges that we still have since even the beginning of the United Nations or the beginning of humanity. But I like the fact that every 10 years there is another attempt to really revitalize and sharpen and reframe the objectives and the importance of why we need to align every once in a while, because every 10 years or 20 years there's a global crisis that usually takes us off our thinking about what's really matters at the long term and the strategic long term. And I hope the COVID-19 and 2020, also we were busy kind of like, trying to vaccinate our people and get back to track. But nevertheless, I think it's our role to make sure that people and organizations and leaders and governments are also paying attention to the long-term objectives of that. So I just wanted to, this is kind of like more generic and general remarks I wanted to make before we get into a more focused discussion. Sorry, Ibrahim, for the...
No worries at all. Many thanks, Dr. Khalid, for your kind words and insights. Absolutely, the Council of Saudi Chambers plays a major role in assisting in the enhancement of the private sector's role in the development of the national economy. So I appreciate your words. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Majid Asfoor, who is the General Manager of the Strategy and Alignment at the Ministry of Economy and Planning. My question to you, Mr. Majid Asfoor, where do we stand in terms of achieving the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs in Saudi Arabia? Mr. Majid, over to you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thanks for hosting this event. It's very important that we get a grasp on the mindset of sustainability these days, and especially after the pandemic. I'm really glad to be part of this session, and it's very good to see some familiar faces. Before I start addressing some of these questions, Brother Ibrahim, allow me to introduce my colleague Yara, who will take us through a little bit of the information that we are going to cover today in this regard. And also I'll take you a little bit on a focused approach on the national efforts when it comes to sustainability, government-wise, and also some of the areas that we've been able to assess the private sector in adopting sustainability. If you allow me, I'll give the floor to my colleague Yara, who will take us through this, and then I'll be addressing the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Majid. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. So as Mr. Majid said, I'll be taking you through the presentation. So the content would be of our presentation today is giving a brief introduction about where we are in terms of progress on SDGs, what is the role of private sector, as well as the challenges and opportunities that we have, and the call to action, and concluding with key takeaways. So if we can move to the next slide. So looking at the progress of, can we move to the next slide? Oh, all right, sorry. So since 2015 and the adoption of the SDGs, we have made some progress, but looking at the progress that has been made so far, obviously we are still off track. So by 2030, we do want to achieve the SDGs, but this needs more effort to be taken into consideration. So despite the achievement, There are still some challenging numbers, as we can see, especially considering addressing it after the stress that COVID-19 has brought to us, which wasn't planned for it to happen, and it happened very unexpectedly. So this has caused a disruption in the way that we think, whether it was in the government, the private sector, the NGOs, academia, and so on. Even in the lifestyle of our own way of moving forward. So this was a wake-up call to get us all back on track and start rethinking the strategy. And to do so, this will require the collaboration between all parties to accelerate this progress and leaving no one behind. So the focus of our presentation today will be on the private sector's commitment and turning these goals into actions for a mutual goal and for their internal benefits. So moving on, as we see that COVID struck in exposing the weakness points that we have and we need to tackle, it also showed our preparedness and our readiness to tackle these issues is a bit very low, but also it shows points of strength when it comes to our adaptability or being resilient. So keeping that, it had a large impact on our health, our climate, and life, and many more aspects of lifestyle. So we need to take actions. We need to be adaptable to any kind of other pandemics that we might be facing. So since the private sector has a critical role to play in sustainable development, they need to rethink their contribution and assert more responsibility towards achieving sustainable development. Yes, they do have a huge role to play when it comes to contributing to GDP, creating jobs, environmental impact, as well as changing and social aspects as well. These, we see that the actions taken by the private sector is definitely impacting the agenda of sustainable development goals. So, and as well as KSA has aimed to have a contribution of private sector with around 65% to the GDP and by 2030. So even though the role of the private sector is critical for the development of GDP employment, it's still not enough to achieve the sustainable development goals. If we can move to the next slide. So we cannot achieve the agenda only by economic development or CSR activities. The concept of sustainability in private sector needs a fundamental rethink. We need to start thinking about developing sustainability strategy, a mandate to take ownership, a change in the way that we are operating our business as usual. And we see that is clear and evident that the world is moving towards that mind shift and shifting towards a more sustainable business, whether it was from the investors, the customers, employees, and so on. Also, with the pressure on corporation to shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism as a trend that we see with corporates, this idea of thinking long-term rather than short-term, we need to start working on taking into consideration what's going to happen within the future and be ready to what can come. We have an example of Riyadh, where there's an objective to currently double the size of Riyadh. So is government taking this into consideration? Is the private sector taking these into their plans? Are they considering what will happen within whether expanding our basic services or the education from schools and so on, and the living conditions that we need and the requirements that are needed on a local level? So this is very important for the private sector to consider. Moving forward, the benefits of thinking of sustainable development is a mindset that will expand beyond economic, social, and environmental protection. Its outcome is multidimensional. We can see that it can benefit in risk reduction and being resilient, or being able to face the pandemics in the future, understand the behavior of the consumer, and as well as moving with the corporate trends. So we see here some of the key facts that have been provided, and that is being evident that companies are moving towards and generating more benefits and profits. So I'll be concluding my part of the presentation with the last slide, if we can move forward. So that's why we see that these are many examples of different companies that are leading the way to adopt sustainability as a core of their business. And they are doing it horizontally, vertically, in all ways to ensure that it's being adopted and there's a rethink when it comes to the way we are approaching sustainability. So moving back to you, Majid.
Thank you, Tara, very much for the insights. And I know that you've asked a question, Ibrahim. Probably we're taking a different turn into providing our input, but why not? So allow me to zoom in a little bit on the current situation when it comes to the private sector in Saudi Arabia and when it comes to sustainability. We've tried our best to engage with a wide spectrum of private sector in different industries to understand their first interest and awareness of sustainability and SDGs at large, and also to see what kind of challenges they have and potential contribution to sustainability. Through our work, we have found that a really small percentage of our private sector in the kingdom is aware of sustainability. The sample you see today in front of you in the slide, after we conducted a workshop with 70 different companies in the kingdom, variation of large and small and medium enterprises, we found that only 40% of them have low to medium awareness of SDGs. Now, this is an alarming number. We couldn't take a bigger sample because the rest of the companies don't even understand or even aware of the concept of sustainability, let alone sustainable development goals. But we found that the larger companies have a higher awareness of sustainability than the smaller ones, which actually pushes the idea of championing these efforts from those large enterprises. What are these large enterprises are doing to the small and medium enterprises when it comes to sustainability or sustainable development? We've also have witnessed some increased number of Saudi companies issuing sustainability reports. Nothing, let's say, not specifically according to a school of thought or another, but there are some, let's say, effort in reporting on sustainability from our private sector, and we've seen this number going up slightly in the last few years. And some of these companies actually are NGOs, not actually private sector as well. So this number, 23 reports published in 2020, a portion of them actually are an NGO, a nonprofit organization. But in general, we've seen that that low awareness or medium awareness has still a potential for adopting sustainability. Through our work, we've witnessed that they have identified some of the challenges that we take into consideration in moving forward with implementing sustainability and making sure that the government is up to date to these challenges with the private sector. Of course, this calls for more collaboration and understanding and dialogue between the private sector and the government, and also the rest of the stakeholders, because as we know, sustainability is a multi-stakeholder approach. Some of these identified challenges have been surfacing in the last, let's say, a few months through our work with the private sector, from insufficient awareness, whether within the private sector or even with the outside of that business, from consumers and investors in public sector. And Yara has mentioned or highlighted some of these numbers into previous slides. Also, there's a little bit low level of effective private and public partnership and lack of recognition or fragmented efforts when it comes to adopting sustainability. I'm sure these challenges are not something new to you, and I'm sure you are aware of them. But how can we tackle those challenges, and how can we all sit together and contribute to sustainability? This is the key question. And what is the role of the private sector when it comes to these challenges or contributing to sustainability? This is something also important that we need to understand and discuss. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So when we understood this kind of dimension when it comes to sustainability, we took it up on ourselves in Ministry of Economy and Planning through Vision 2030 to ensure that the private sector has what it takes to adopt sustainability. We do have one of the strategic objectives regarding enhancing the business focus on the sustainability the economy. And what we try to do is to actually help the private sector understand sustainability, adopt sustainable practices, and give them the knowledge that they need to do so. But that does not mean that the private sector can sit comfortably and just wait for the government to do this kind of stuff to incentivize them to adopt sustainability. Sustainability has become a necessity for the private sector rather than something that they need to be incentivized for. And when we look at some of the practices for the private sector, whether at a national level or regional or international, we stop and ask ourselves what kind of impact this private sector is having on the development areas in any country at any level, whether it's national, regional, or local. And this is really an important question that needs to be addressed from the top to the bottom in any business structure. So we try to bring this mindset through our work and through our Vision 2030 initiatives to the private sector. So you can move to the next slide, please. Now it's very important that the private sector can rethink, just like what we mentioned before, the idea of sustainability. How can we strategize this work? How can we prioritize? Based on what areas do we prioritize our work when it comes to adopting sustainability for the private sector? And how can we understand the impact of this kind of work? When I understand that at the national level or at the local level, if I have a gap, what is the role of that major private sector? If I'm sitting here in Riyadh and I'm talking to the largest enterprises here, and I know that in Riyadh I have, for example, an issue when it comes to food waste. What is this private sector doing about it? Are we sitting and just opening a CSR department and handing out some checks and giving some help to those in needs? Or are we thinking differently about the impact of our work to actually elevate the understanding or making sure that those people who are left behind are part of the producing members of the community rather than a burden. So this is a really important dimension that we have to take into consideration. And also we need to instill that mindset of collaboration and partnership. The private sector is no longer in competition with each other. We can play that game all the time to compete with ourselves, but that competition will also only lead to some of the private sector to be out instead of contribution to sustainability, will be averted into sustainability as well. And we've seen that some of these numbers have been increasing in the last few years. More than 60% of companies that have incorporated sustainability in their businesses have recorded increase in profit, especially during COVID-19. And we've seen some of the great examples in that. And also then 90% of the S&P 500 companies publish sustainability reports as of 2019 in comparison to 20% in 2012. When I compare that number to the national number, we have less than 1% from our listed companies produce sustainability reporting. And to us, this is a problem. Do we need to call each company and say, like, come on, adopt sustainability? If the private sector cannot rise to the occasion and understand the level of urgency now to adopt sustainability, then we're going to have more challenges to tackle. Next, please. So this actually puts pressure on the audience that we have now, actually, as CEOs, because it starts from the top, it starts from the bottom. If the CEO, if the top of the pyramid does not adopt this mindset, that it will never be translated to the bottom, right? So we need to start rethinking our approach. We need to shape the culture of transformation that we have in adopting this kind of thinking when it comes to sustainability and being resilient and making sure that we can overcome future pandemics and future challenges, because this happened. Another pandemic will happen definitely, whether it's tomorrow, after tomorrow. I'm not being negative, I'm just being realistic. Through our history, we always face pandemics. And even if we don't, it doesn't mean we can just sit comfortable. We need to reimagine our role as leaders, you know, sitting on top of that pyramid. And we have to change the way we conduct our business and get the buy-in from all the stakeholders at all levels, whether within that business environment or even outside. We need to start to thinking sustainability does not start only within that company. I've met with companies. Companies came to us to ask us about sustainability, and some of them even had the courage to actually present to us some of their sustainability strategies. And guess what? The first thing that we've witnessed is that they've developed their sustainability strategy in a closed door, in a small meeting room. They've designed a committee. I'm not going to point fingers here, but they've designed an internal committee, 5-6 people working on sustainability, and they designed a sustainability strategy. What about your consumer? What about your supply chain? What about the community that you perform under? Why are we looking at sustainability from within? Sustainability is bigger than that. We need to think about it differently. And we need to start investing in talent. We need to start investing in people with capacity, with skills, to ensure that we have what it takes to adopt these kind of thinking. And I'm not going to talk about these figures, because it doesn't matter whether we have 200 leading CEOs or 100 CEOs. If we cannot start seeing the change on the ground, then it doesn't matter if we reach 100% of these CEOs understanding the urgency or the importance of sustainability. It's about implementing and following up with this mindset rather than just having it sitting in our heads. Next, please. Next slide. All right. So another dimension that I really would love to highlight is the local aspect of sustainability, which is something that is of a high importance to achieve sustainability, because it starts at the local level. Now, if the private sector does not understand or is not aware of the development needs at the local level, then your contribution to sustainability, by all means, is a little bit of a wasted effort. Because if we sit and operate in a business community, I can give you a small story about a company that I've witnessed while studying abroad, where they actually impacted the environment of that community negatively. But here's the dilemma, that if you remove that business, you're going to remove jobs with it. And if you remove those jobs, you're going to put people back into poverty. And if you put them back into poverty, then that development area is gone. And your GDP will go down, and that community will not be able to prosper and actually sustain itself to survive. So what kind of information are we sending to the private sector when we go and tell them, you know what, go operate there, harm the environment, and don't worry about anything else? We need to be balanced in our approach. We need to understand our impact when it comes to profit generating toward the environmental aspect and the social aspect and the economic aspect as well. And if we cannot actually put our fingers on the areas that we need to focus on at the local level, then we're not going to be able to achieve sustainability at the national level, let alone international, right? So one of these areas that we need to focus on is the localization of our efforts when it comes to sustainability. How can the private sector contribute to the development needs at the local level? Do we need more schools? Do we need more hospitals? Do we need more training centers? Instead of handing out just free seminars and tickets or coupons or something that helps sustain things for the short term, we need to think long term at the local level. And it starts from there. And it takes effort to actually understand the local level. If that company can partner with the NGO and some of the other private sectors within that community, we can get down to the numbers on what that community needs and start shaping our sustainability contribution towards something more tangible rather than just something as an umbrella or fluffy. Next slide, please. I think I'm coming toward the end. This is some of the key takeaways. You can read them, you can comprehend them, you can digest them, you can believe in them, but if we don't take them into our hearts and put them into action, then there is no point of us being aware of them. We need to not underestimate our power of our own examples. Whatever we adopt today, whatever we implement, we can become a champion, we can become a role model to everybody else. If we believe in it, then we have to put it into action. If we don't put it into action, then probably we didn't even believe in it in the first place. We have to understand our role as influencing community, whether to the private sector, governments, and etc. The private sector needs to act as a different stakeholder when it comes to policy making. Instead of just proposing some challenges that the government needs to solve, then you have responsibility to raise the occasion and propose a solution as well, rather than just sitting and receiving some feedback or some support. Leadership is about having a courage to the change, insist on the change, and deliver on a decade of action. We have 9 years left. We're behind. Probably we're not going to be able to accomplish everything that sustainability is calling for, but at least we can start from now. And if we're not going to start from now, I don't know what kind of pandemic do we need for us to actually wake up and start, you know? It is time for everybody, not just CEOs and companies, to drive transformational change required to create the world we want. And we call on all of you guys, and even upon ourselves, that we need to take action now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majid Al-Asfoor. I definitely agree with you. Partnership is important, and the private sector needs to lead the change and build back better and greener. This is really explaining the important role of the private sector in accelerating the implementation of the Saudi Vision 2030 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Let us stop here and see if any of the CEOs has any questions for Mr. Majid Asfoor or for Dr. Khalid.
Yes, hello, this is Abdullah Al-Fawzan. Yeah, thank you for all the presentation. Thank you for Dr. Khalid and for Natalie and for everyone organizing this. Actually, I came here to be more in the listening mode than the talking mode, but it's great to see the government and the union of the Chamber of Commerce is involved in this, helping the United Nations, shaping up, you know, the sustainability agenda in the Saudi private sector. My question is to Mr. Majid Al-Asfoor. I mean, I saw that he's passionate about the subject and he's holding a stick more than a carrot for the private sector, which is fine. But I think the issue here is that I've been with KPMG for 21 years. And since I joined KPMG, the sustainability agenda in the global level is more advanced than the Saudi level. And not only that is advanced, is actually our structure, our social contract, and our way of conducting business and issuing laws was stopping us from even putting some of the sustainability objectives that the global firm wants. Now we are, in the last 4 years, we are now out of this hurdle, but we need time. We need time, we need government support, we need education, we need a lot of things. So I think the right things here is not to, I understand your point and I'm fully support. Actually, I'm happy to hear that there is a part of the government responsible of handling this agenda along with the United Nations. But I think we need to use more of a collaborative approach rather than directive. But my question to you, do you have any plan? I mean, I'm not, unfortunately, I didn't participate in this discussion you had before, but I would be happy to be part of this going forward. But I think more engagement with a real influencer in the private sector is more important than engaging with maybe just a number of people. So I think we need to have more of a collaboration or a platform where we can work together. Is there any plan? And we need your support on that.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah, for your valuable input. I agree with you. We need a more of a collaborative effort, you know, but sometimes when we get really passionate about the subject, we start pointing fingers, right? And this is why we need to stop pointing fingers and we need to start collaborating. And that collaboration requires an open arm, it requires an open mind to actually sit and listen and discuss. Yes, we do have some efforts. I mentioned a little bit about our strategic objective within Vision 2030. This is related to sustainability of the private sector. Our aim is actually to create this platform, and we are working in collaboration with the UN Global Compact and the UN Country Office as well to actually open up this kind of dialogue and discussion for the private sector so you can engage on a regular basis, understand the trend, the challenges, and the opportunities when it comes to sustainability. Of course, we have the same plan, and we are expecting to roll this very, very soon. Inshallah, by this year, we hope.
If I may chime in here, and thanks Fahad for raising the question, and I agree. And just to kind of like give you a background about how we came today together, discussing this with government and also with the UN. This is just all really happened almost like less than 2 months ago. So we are really in the process, even here in the council. Certainly, maybe our role is kind of like communicate and increase awareness among the business community, and maybe help create that collaborative and joint and collective, elevate this from just personal or individual companies to make it a more collective responsibility. Maybe writing some case studies about successful examples, that I'm sure there's some good examples in Saudi Arabia and abroad that we could bring into the field. Also recognizing some of the businesses that leading, but actually we're still in the thinking process. So really we welcome the council, for example, have certainly access to all the chambers of commerce in Saudi Arabia, 28 of them. So we could communicate with them easily. We could provide them with all the information. We could maybe organize events, thought leaders, seminars. We could talk about all this. But again, it's going to be always, at the let's say 40,000 feet above the ground. So I think we need to think of, and we want to hear from you, from the businesses, how you want us to pursue this mission. How can we help, given our resources, given our position that we have access to all the government entities, but also we have access to all businesses around the country, whether they're big, medium, or small. We would like to hear from you. How can we, because we're still discussing with the United Nations, with our friends at MAP and others, how to shape this partnership, how to really take it from just a discussion today to maybe 1 year later, we could have, as Majid said, that we take it to the local community across the country, and maybe have maybe at least 20% success this year. Then we kind of like expand on it in the next 5 years, and hopefully we get maybe 50 or a little bit more than 50 in 2030. So maybe it's a good question for the organizer to ask each one of the participants, just what is the recommendation for us, because we are signing a partnership or an MOU, but we need to come up with, okay, the objective is great, but what kind of initiatives and resources and actual, actions we need to put in place to achieve this, so we don't come back maybe a year from now and we just repeat the same thing without showing any success or achievements.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid and Mr. Majid. I'll take it from here and move forward. It is time, I think, for the CEOs to tell us more about their business and their roles in the development of the national economy and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. So my questions to the CEOs, how do you ensure that your core business is aligned with the SDGs? And can you provide us with concrete examples of how your company is driving the local impact on the SDGs? And I will start with Mr. Turki Shehri, the CEO of NG. Mr. Turki, if you can answer this question, I'm moving to you.
Well, thank you, Ibrahim. I hope I'm audible and everybody can hear me. But the pleasure connecting with everybody. I think this is a great platform, and I think this is based on the previous discussions. I think this is exactly what is required as a first stepping stone, is putting both the public and private sector together, identifying these challenges and finding out how to execute. Because I strongly believe that, yes, it's the public sector that will set the strategy, the regulation, but ultimately it's the private sector that will execute. And as such, without having that clear link between both organizations, we will always be a little bit lost. But with respect to NG and what we're doing with regards to SDGs is, I don't think, this is no longer a choice. I think this is what our investors want, what our stakeholders want, what our employees want, what our clients want. So it's just a matter of how to get it done quickly, effectively, and cost effectively. So I can tell you for us, and this is worthwhile sharing with everyone, is we have a Chief Sustainability Officer. So this is a full-time position. It's not just at group level, it's also at regional level. And this Chief Sustainability Officer is in touch with every country CEO to see how we apply our SDGs, how our initiatives are in place, and what and how we're progressing on these initiatives. And just real quickly, if I can highlight, companies, multinational companies, they really look into the details of every country. And I can tell you, for NG, we look at the policies and the statements being made in Saudi, and we've already identified which SDG goals is Saudi focusing on. Not what they publicly announce, but what is actually being done as a result of regulations and projects and so forth. So this is I think what many companies do that maybe not all the public sector is aware of. At the same time, we also map it to what SDGs can we do in Saudi in line with strategy and does not impede regulations. And I think this is something very important that I would also like to re-emphasize on, and that is sometimes the regulation impede us, right? Sometimes we're not allowed to apply a certain initiative or project that will enhance the SDG because it's not permitted. And I'm sure there's many cases there, but as a last note, I really hope that we maintain this type of dialogue. I would like that share everything that we do within NG and other companies, not just for us to share what we're doing, but also to learn what we're doing and adopt accordingly, as well as share our challenges with the public sector and vice versa. What does the public sector require from us to do more? So I hope I didn't take too much time, but thank you all for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turki. Very insightful words. I'm moving now to Ms. Badur Rushidi, the Chief Executive Officer of the Jazan Energy and Development. Ms. Badur, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, actually, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm enjoying the presentation. It's really insightful for the private sector, for me personally. I just want to highlight a point and emphasize on the point that Mr. Abdullah Fawzan mentioned, the awareness. I think this is the starting point. And surprisingly, we are really behind when it comes to the raising awareness on the sustainability goals. The stereotype in most of the companies, not the international, the large corporates, it's that developing or investing in sustainability, it might be associated with cost, and it's not the right time to do this considering the pandemic. So while I spent the past 2 days going through every single KPI in the UN website and align it with what have we done in 2020, and I discovered that we have done a lot to improve our practice. We are operating in agriculture and aquaculture, so we did a lot to improve the practice. We did a lot to create jobs. We did a lot to train females in the local community. But in our mind, it was not for the sustainability. It was to improve the business and make it more solid and sustainable. So I think having this link with the purpose, what are the drivers for the private sector to do this? Sustainability in our mind, mostly in Saudi, and I think this is my perspective, that companies allocate budget and spend it on I don't know, supporting entrepreneurs, sponsoring scholarships, things like this, but never investing on the businesses or looking at different KPIs or goals within the sustainability. So I think awareness is a really key thing. Building the partnership between different government agencies and the private sector to understand what's required from us, what's in it for us, it's crucial. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Abdur. Now we're going to Mr. Ryan Faiz, the Managing Director, CEO of the Bank Saudi Fransi.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here with this esteemed group of panelists. I mean, I'm going to echo some of what has been said before, but also focus on what we've done specifically at BSF. Obviously, we don't have to reiterate the importance of sustainability, reiterate the importance of this topic globally, reiterate the importance of the private sector really taking charge of this topic at an organization by organization level, and not waiting for the public sector to push any regulations down. We can see it, you know, as Mr. Turki mentioned, you know, we are being demanded by our investors, by our regulators, by our stakeholders, by everyone around our industry, in particular in banking, to really do the right thing. And that pressure has only intensified in the last couple of years, and it will only be more aggressive going forward. So we need to do the right thing ourselves before we are forced to do it. Within BSF, we've recognized the importance of this topic. At a senior management, at the board level, we have really restructured some of our committees to address this topic specifically. So we had, for instance, a CSR committee at the board. It has now been changed to be called the Sustainability Committee. So when we think of corporate social responsibility as a single aspect of what sustainability is all about, it's not only CSR, sustainability, it goes way beyond that. So a board committee actually looks after our sustainability initiatives within the bank. When we created that committee and decided what are we going to focus on going forward, we looked at it from two different lenses. From the lens of what can a financial sector or a financial institution like BSF, where can it make an impact? And when we look at the Financial Sector Development Program, there are a lot of initiatives there where BSF as a large bank in the industry can contribute into the Financial Sector Development Program. But at the same time, we looked at the SDGs. And when we looked at the SDGs, we have identified 7 specific SDGs where us as a bank can contribute, aligned with the Vision 2030, obviously objectives, but more importantly, areas where as a bank can make a real impact. Areas, for instance, of no poverty. You know, financial inclusiveness is an important part, and doing the best we can to create a more financially inclusive environment. Areas such as good, you know, SDG 3, good health and well-being. Very importantly, SDG 5, gender equality. So it is actually within our charter, our Sustainability Committee charter. These 7 specific SDGs are ones that we're focused on and creating programs to deliver against, obviously, the sustainability of BSF, but aligned very much so with these 7 SDGs where we can make the most impact. I believe it's very important, depending on the industry, depending on the organization, depending on the maturity of the various organizations, to identify areas where it's not only lip service, to identify areas where the impact is really made. What are we doing with that going forward? We are one of the companies, inshallah, in 2021, issuing a sustainability report. You know, one that obviously Majid has been really shouting and screaming about, you know, companies like us not doing enough of. And I agree with him. I think there is very little. We're starting from behind as a country and as the private sector in the country. But there's a lot to catch up on, and I think there's a huge room to do that. So a sustainability report is going to come out, inshallah, in the next couple of months. But beyond that, we're working very hard on building the right brand and image for BSF to be a leader in this area. We have an annual conference that we started a couple of years ago. Every year has its own theme. Obviously, 2 years ago it was physical. Last year in 2019, we elected to do it virtual. 2020, sorry. We elected to do it virtual given COVID. And the theme of that event is ESG, where opportunities where we all win. So how can we really not only go from an organization that will work internally to deliver on these goals, develop the right policies and targets for ourselves, develop the right disclosure mechanism to disclose these sustainability reports. But beyond all of that, be a thought leader and an advocate of this cause, whether it impacts us directly or not. And I believe this is something that we feel quite strongly about and working very hard towards. I had the privilege in 2020 to chair the Finance and Infrastructure Task Force of the B20. And the amount of discussion and pressure that comes around sustainability related to the policies that have been put in place, for me, it was an eye-opener, and it kind of created the awareness that this is coming. It has come, but it's coming more aggressively going forward. In the past, when people talked about finance and infrastructure, it was broad. This year, the topics and the title was sustainable finance and sustainable infrastructure. So people are no longer talking about infrastructure and finance as broad terms. They're much more focused on the sustainability of those two sectors, and we can see that across the board. I hope I didn't take more than my time slot, and look forward to having this engaging discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. Dr. Abdullah Al-Fazan, Chairman of KPMG. Over to you, Dr. Abdullah.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry. All right. You can hear me, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. As you know, being after the bankers immediately is not a good choice for me. They have a lot of money to spend, not like us. But look, I've been dealing with the sustainability agenda for a long time now, and in 2007, I raised the flag of equality and gender equality and women empowerment, and they've been beaten up by a lot of people at that time. But anyway, I think we are proud to say that dealing with the part of human capital empowerment and improvement, especially women, we managed to take our firm from 6 people to 600 Saudi nationals, and out of these people, more than 200 female. And this all done because one important element is that the tone from the top and the culture of the organization. And this is cannot be replaced by any amount of cash you put on any initiatives. So with all due respect for having, a designated individual who will look at the sustainability, in my humble view, this is not the right model. I'll give you an example around education and solving part of the, let's say, one of the goals, important goals for sustainability is to have more job for the nationals now and in the future. And we have 90% of our employees foreigners in 2004. And we're growing by 20%. So that if you do the math, we need to, if we reaching at least to 20% or 30%, you need 500 Saudis to get to that. Anyway, we managed through me holding the nationalization or Saudization agenda, spending money on it, not giving it to some junior staff. And we ended up almost having #1 nationalization percentage among the professional companies, with almost 50%, with the 600 people. And this is not, it's not just a marketing tool. This is sustainability for our model as a business and for the future of the country and for the market at large, because we managed to produce thousands of experts in the market who are now serving the Saudi economy. So I think the education and the empowerment of young generation is a very important sustainability agenda that we are putting as a part of our core. And I agree with Majid and with the report that he showed, that without having this as a top strategy level, handled by the man #1 in the organization, I don't think this will be successful. I think the other element is to look into how you can make sure that this cascaded down to the organization. So we put a lot of efforts in the top not doing the normal CSR of volunteering or no, but trying to be ourselves as a role models, and we lead from the top by showing the people that this is part of our success as an organization. For example, trust, quality and trust. I mean, we provide as an organization trust on the economy and how the people invest on the stock market, and how can we make sure that the companies in the future are doing the right things. Partnering with the right, or working with the right companies in the community is very important. So I think it's linking everything we do as an organization, but we need to go to the core business. Like, you know, I am a professional company providing accounting, tax, and advisory. I cannot pay money like the banks for programs, but I can do a lot in education and women empowerment and equality and trust on economy and so on. So even with aligning all of our strategic objectives with Vision 2030, because it's a simple thing. You see that Vision 2030 objectives, strategic objectives, economic objectives. If you align yourself with it, I think by default you will be having a lot of sustainability. To close, I think it's not a problem of putting effort in sustainability. It's about measuring the impact and reporting the impact, which I second what Faiz said. We are issuing also a report this year, inshallah, of sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah. And now I'm going to Mr. Pat Manhattan, President and CEO of Aqua Power. Mr. Pat,
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm really, really glad to be able to attend this and also see this event, because, well, I was a little bit horrified when I saw the reference to the fact that so many people didn't know of SDG goals. Look, I think just now I entirely agree with what Abdullah said. I think many of the companies, if they recognize the goals, existence of the goals, and look at what they are doing, they're probably going to find that they actually are already delivering on some of it. That doesn't mean we go home. It does mean then that we become more aware and we start to do much more. And it is through measurement and it's through disclosure and reporting that you can really set the target and prioritize the objectives. Anyway, let me quickly give you a little bit on what we have at Aqua Power have been doing. Well, very fortunately, I've got to start off by confessing that we are blessed in the business that we have elected to pursue. My shareholders were visionary. They said, go focus on reliably delivering electricity and desalinated water as an investor, owner, and an operator. So, okay, so straight away that means that we are focused, we're very much in the business. So water and power are not just the basic ingredients for economic development and social prosperity. They are absolute vital ingredients for the way we live today anyway. So it's basic essentials for life. SDG 6, SDG 7, straight away, we plug ourselves into it. Right from the outset, we're 15 years old. Right from day one, back in 2004, we convinced ourselves that the nature of our business is such that we need to focus on reliably, responsibly delivering electricity and water in bulk at the lowest possible cost. So we convinced ourselves that we should not be market pricing. We should not be saying, oh, somebody else is able to provide at 5 cents, I should do it at 4.9. No. We convinced ourselves that we must focus on cost, minimizing cost, reasonable, risk-reflective margin, whatever that number is. If somebody is supplying at 5, and if I can do it at 2.5, no issue. We're going to do it at 2.5. Even if it means, using contracting language, leaving money on the table. So intrinsically, we have been very much involved from the earliest days with affordable, providing energy at an affordable level, continuing to keep driving down cost. Now, because of the nature of our business, which is all about investing lots of money upfront, because these are very capital intensive assets, and then collecting it by selling power and water in bulk over 15, 20, 25, 35 years even, in some instances. We need to be very sure that it's not just the contract that we rely on. That's a very long time. The health, wealth, and happiness of the countries we invest in, the societies we work with, are there to continue to afford the water that we supply and the power and continue to keep paying back. So very much to serve ourselves, we need to focus, we realized from day one, on the health, wealth, and happiness of the communities that we work with and we invest in and we live in. So that meant us focusing on, from the earliest days, on community development, maximization of local content, because there is no benefit in us exporting money. If we're investing in Saudi Arabia, investing in Morocco, investing in South Africa, we should look at how to maximize the retention of that money in that economy, how to create employment opportunities, because it is really the employment, wealth creation that sorts out so many other issues. It's very difficult to have good health and have well-being if you are not able to be economically active and generate. So we very much focus our attention and efforts on SDG 3, that's health and well-being, SDG 4, quality education, because we are a technology-based business. We consume a lot of resources, human resources. So it's very important to us. We continue to develop people. Very much from the earliest days on SDG 5, gender equality, because there is no point in leaving half of that captive human resource behind. They're very valuable participants. And SDGs 6 and 7, as I said to you, are very much in our business. And over the last sort of 10 years, we have, responding to market demand, we have stepped right into renewable energy in a very significant way, continue to drive down cost across the world. And so we're very much involved in SDG 13, which is climate action, as well as in intrinsically and very consciously in SDG 12, responsible consumption, continuing to increase efficiency in what we do, reduce consumption, whether it is resources, fuel, whatever. So, good news to Majid, he doesn't need to cane me. We are not a publicly listed company yet, but very voluntarily from way back as 2000, and maybe I'm going to get this wrong now. I think it's 2009. 2008, we started to publish an annual report, very unusual for a private company, and we did. And I think in 2010, we started to publish a separate sustainability report, because we recognized that, okay, we are doing stuff, but it is better to measure and put it out there, good, bad, or indifferent. Then you can continue to build on and improve. So we do publish. You're welcome to go onto our website, aquapower.com, and you will see our reports and all the past reports as well. And you can write and complain to us if we are not performing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paddy. I'm going now to Mr. Patrick Shalhoub, the Group President of Shalhoub Group. Mr. Patrick. All right, we'll come back to Mr. Patrick. Then I'm going now to Mr. Yassin Asfoor, the President and CEO of Ayman Group. Mr. Yassin, up to you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be with you here. Thanks to Her Excellency Natalie. Ibrahim, honestly, I don't have much to add. I mean, my colleagues really, they touch base on very important topics. Maybe if you allowed me just to say a few words. Personally, of course, thanks to Sarah, I've been coordinating with her. Personally, I'm involved in the United Nations Global Compact as a vice chair of the World Business Organization in Paris, representing 45 million business we are actually the partner of UN in this project. So personally, I'm involved in globally, and I'm looking forward, of course, I mean, to enhance it here in Saudi Arabia. But let me tell you a little bit about our experience here in Saudi Arabia. And I believe that having your business to be healthy, okay, you have to fix other people's problems. Without fixing other people's problems, you cannot have a long, healthy business. And without having healthy environment in your organization, within your people, within your suppliers, within your partners, you know, you cannot continue your business. So what we did actually is a small example what we did. And I appreciated what Abdullah also mentioned, Dr. Abdullah and Rayyan, they mentioned. What we did in our organization, we create a special committee, and actually we look at what is the most important department that we are having. We're having the HR department, we're having the client relation department, and by the way, we also create a new division, we call it Chief Happiness Officer, that will take care of our people. Because we believe for our business to continue, I think there is two important components that we look at it, our people and our partners. And believe it or not, you'll be surprised, when we conducted a survey, we find out actually, even though the people without their knowledge about UN SDG, they are actually talking about the same objective. What is their need, okay? And it's actually matching the Global Compact goals. So we took that surveyor from our people, from our partner, and we believe that we say, okay, for us to implement it, we have to make sure that our people, our partners, our suppliers, they have to implement it. So I do support Dr. Abdullah when he mentioned have to come first from the national levels all the way below. Bear in mind that in Saudi Arabia, most of the business here is a family business, and you have SMEs. And if you look today at the SMEs, and even though I was talking to Sarah the other day, SMEs will never implement these goals unless the big organization have it as part of their organization, and could be also as an enforcement law all the way down to your supply chain, to your suppliers, to your partner here. So maybe answering to Dr. Khalid and Majid the question, it's not about only awareness. I mean, people really, Majid, you need more of training. We have really to spend a lot of time in training. What we did, for example, in ICC Paris, we come up with a special program for SMEs, and we try to invest in the training. And I'll be happy, by the way, to share it with you, because we have our own academy that's working with the UN, providing a special training. So we as an organization, yes, we are working in this one, and we are part of the UN Global Compact. And well, by the way, we already submitted the application, Sarah, so the team is already working on it. Our organization in Paris, for example, we are a member already of the UN Global Compact. So just to summarize, I think Global Compact is not about your business only. It's about integrated business, your supply chain, your partner, your people, your team have to implement it to have really successful goals. Thanks, Ibrahim.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yassin. I'm trying to see if Mr. Patrick Shalhoub can join us. Mr. Patrick? Okay. In this case, I want to thank you all very much for your insights, which were highly informative. And I will give the floor to my colleague Sarah for her closing remarks. And
Patrick is there, by the way, Ibrahim. Patrick is there.
Yeah, I tried, but I think he's having some difficulties. All right, I will go to Sarah now, and then I think we have enough time to go back maybe for some questions and to Mr. Patrick Shalhoub as well. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Brahim. I'm just trying to share my screen, just a minute. So we will be hearing some closing remarks from the CEO of UN Global Compact, Ms. Sanda.
United Nations Global Compact. Let me begin by saying how grateful we are to the UN Resident Coordinator, not only for hosting this meeting, but also for supporting the establishment of a Global Compact local network in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Anchored firmly within the UN system and chaired by the Secretary General, the UN Global Compact is the largest corporate sustainability initiative in the world. More than 12,000 companies and 3,000 non-business signatories have joined the Global Compact since its founding in the year 2000. Our participants come from 160 countries, and we now have 69 country-based local networks. I hope that figure will soon rise to 70 with the addition of a Global Compact network in Saudi Arabia. Business leaders who sign on to the UN Global Compact make a commitment to align their business strategies and practices with our 10 principles spanning human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. When companies integrate these universal principles into their core operations and across their value chains, they also contribute to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This is essential work because even though the world has made great strides towards some of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, progress on others has stalled or even reversed since their adoption in 2015. Income inequality continues to rise. Systemic injustices based on race, ethnicity, faster than many experts predicted. And now, COVID-19 has caused a humanitarian and economic crisis that threatens to push the SDGs even further off track. The global economy is reeling from the impact of the pandemic, which has exposed the fragility of our systems and the inequality in our societies. There was a time when it may have been enough for the global business community to adopt the mantra of do no harm. That time has passed. We have arrived in a new era of elevated expectations and elevated responsibilities. Business as usual is no longer an option. This crisis has shown us that we must become more resilient to recover better together. More than ever, we need business to take coordinated, decisive, innovative action, along with governments, the United Nations, civil society organizations, and other key players. To deliver a more sustainable future, businesses of all sizes in all sectors must collaborate locally, regionally, and globally. This very much includes the small and medium-sized enterprises that are the backbone of many emerging economies. Such ambitious collaboration is at the heart of the UN Global Compact's new strategic plan for 2021 through to 2023, which seeks to accelerate business action on the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement. As we have learned, pandemics do not recognize national borders, and neither does the climate crisis. That is why any sustainable recovery from the devastation of COVID-19 must be built on a global foundation of climate resilience. We know this is the way forward, but we have a long way to go. The scope of challenge emerged in the progress report produced by the UN Global Compact for our 20th anniversary last year. One of its key findings was that companies need to be far more ambitious at scale to meet the objectives of the 2030 Agenda. The report found that 84% of companies participating in the Global Compact are taking action on the SDGs. However, only 46% were embedding these global goals into their core business. Just 39% have set targets for emission reductions and other steps towards sustainability that are sufficiently ambitious, measurable, and science-based to align with the SDGs. To make a meaningful impact on the 2030 Agenda, businesses must match their ambition with action, and many more companies must step up to the challenge. This is a critical opening for the Saudi private sector. But how do you get started? How do you effectively communicate your sustainability story? How do you turn future risks into business opportunities and effect change within your country? The UN Global Compact can help you answer those questions with expert guidance, training, and resources. We want to support your efforts to build trust and transparency, to achieve your company's sustainability objectives, and in turn, to help shape the kingdom's sustainability agenda. And while we do not yet have a global compact local network in Saudi Arabia, we know that many Saudi businesses are already integrating the SDGs into their policies and practices. We hope to build on your good work to establish closer ties. I urge you to not only continue, but accelerate your efforts in support of the 2030 Agenda. The UN Global Compact is here to work with you, side by side, uniting business for a better world. Thank you.
So this was Ms. Sanda, the CEO of UN Global Compact, urging all companies to join the UN Global Compact here in Saudi Arabia. I just wanted to give it one more try for Mr. Patrick. Yes, perfect. You just need to unmute yourself.
So, are you hearing me well? Sorry.
Yes, right now. Great.
Thank you. So I was apologizing for the technical glitch, but I was part of the conversation. Very interesting, and thank you for organizing it and for inviting me to this to the meeting. I mean, just to introduce ourselves, Shalom Group is a retailer who is regional and with a strong base in Saudi Arabia with over 250 retail stores and 10 websites operating and 12,000 people, out of which 4,000 in Saudi Arabia. As a family business, I mean, which has been established about now 65 years ago, we always felt that we need to conduct our business in a very responsible way. So since now 7 years, we joined the UN Global Compact, but I think that the sense of sustainability for us and for our group is really what's important for any family business or any business, which is how to create a sustainable business for the future. And if we want to create the sustainable business for the future, we have to make sure that you are living in a sustainable environment and therefore extremely attached to be responsible into doing it. We established our sustainability report since now about 7 years, 8 years, and publish it every year. Also, we are a privately held company. But for us, I would say, and unlike what was perhaps pointed out a little bit earlier, the pressure is not coming from the government. And the pressure is not only coming because of our belief as a family and as a group. The real pressure is coming from our consumers, and increasingly so, and from our team members. I mean, our average age within the group is 32 years old, and this young generation is extremely attached to purpose and sustainability. And I think that this is something which will go increasingly with time. And in fact, we are often in a position where we try, sorry for it, Mr. Majid, to put pressure on the government to get their cooperation and support. So I think pressure is coming not only up to down, but down to up. And there is obviously the role of a leader. So if I go back to the two questions of Ibrahim, how we ensure that our core business is aligned with SDG. So what we have started to do is to make an assessment every 3 years, an assessment in depth of the materiality. And we are conducting with outside partners surveys, interview, workshops in order to see what are the material issues which we have in regard of all the sustainability agenda. In the last one, which we made now 2.5 years ago, so in 2018, we found like 16 material issues, and then discussing it within our COMEX, we reduced to 4 or 6 top priorities, and then we have split it up in each one of the different areas, be it in the supply chain, corporate governance, our customer centricity drive, and etc., and making sure that we encompass all the elements which will answer and fill the gap which we have found. So just to give few examples of where we have focused, we are true believers that we need to remain extremely focused, and even if all the SDGs are important, we selected few of them, and on those few, we feel that it will have a rippling effect on the other SDGs. So we selected a little bit what has been done by Aqua, but in a totally different industry, both SDG 12 and 13 on responsible production and consumption and climate action, in order to make sure that as a business, we are absolutely responsible. We installed solar panels everywhere where the regulation and the government has supported us into it. We have made a huge recycling program and pushing the developers, the mall, and often the government in order to provide us some of those recycling factories which are absolutely needed. One on the water filtration. So we moved quite a lot, but also we made our suppliers and service provider absolutely responsible and committed to be responsible into their production and consumption, and made a pledge in order to go for the 1.5 degree climate change and trying to replace a little bit all the carbon which is there. We even created certain formulas in order to make sure that in all our stores, in all our offices, etc., we are reducing at the minimum all our consumption and making sure that we do it. We also developed in other areas, particularly on SDG 5 on gender equality and reducing inequality, with a group which has 60% female, and where we try to, again to have inclusion, including of people of iron will and of determination within all our activities, and making sure that we do it. And we really feel that it's not only making us feel good, but we really feel a strong motivation which encompasses into it. And the last point, which we have recently introduced in a very strong way, is really our drive into the human rights, and really trying to see how within our context, within our environment, we can be a strong advocate for the human rights program, and into it really try to create a framework, a kind of speak up platform for employees to raise their voice, to raise their concerns if there is any breach in terms of ethics, and renew all totally our code of ethics, which I feel is quite extremely important in our part of the world. And I'm sure that increasingly we will have this pressure, but also this belief into it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Becek. We're going back to Sarah now. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Brahim, and thank you, Mr. Patrick. I believe you play a huge role as being members of the UN Global Compact, and your active role is really very significant for Global Compact. So I just wanted to take a couple of questions from the attendees. I guess this question is for Mr. Majid Asfoor. So we have a question from Mr. George saying, what are your policy plans for reducing carbon emissions in the atmosphere? Specifically, what is your preferred strategy for decarbonizing the kingdom's emission-intensive industries?
Thank you very much for this question. I don't think I'm at liberty to answer this question, as this goes to the Ministry of Energy rather than Ministry of Economy and Planning. Yes, but I think everything probably you need to know is already public information that you can access from the Ministry's website and also the Paris Agreement website when it comes to that.
Thank you, Mr. Majid. There's another question. How can we play an active role at the UN Global Compact Saudi Arabia? So we're currently, we still didn't establish the network, so we're planning to do that hopefully by August. You can become members of the UN Global Compact, and you will have access to a lot of tools and training. We're also planning to do a lot of workshops with the government and with UN agencies, whether it was on reporting on the SDGs or on several topics like environment, labor rights, human rights, and so forth. So definitely you can get in touch with us and we can support you on that. So thank you very much for this inspiring panel discussion. Thank you to all our speakers for helping us to start this important conversation. Really, your time is much appreciated. Feel free to reach out to me or my colleague Ibrahim if you have any questions. Of course, we'll be sharing the recording of this webinar with you shortly to revisit the conversation. So I would like to extend again a big thank you to our wonderful speakers who took the time to join us today. We highly appreciate it, and we hope to continue this conversation in the near future. Thank you and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.